Hello and welcome to the podcast Life Without Limits. This is the podcast where we talk to inspiring people who have been through tough times and come out the other side to achieve great things. Today I've got a very inspiring guest. His name's Henry Dunn. Henry went traveling after graduating from university, and while he was traveling in Australia, he had an accident where it resulted in him losing his arm. So he's going to tell us a bit about his story, how his accident happened, and how he got into adaptive CrossFit recently. Hi, Henry. How are you?
How you doing, Ant? Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you and your story.
So I'm 24 now. I was 23 when I lost my arm in Australia. So went to university and studied sports injuries and rehabilitation. Used to play rugby, team sport, always a sporty individual. And then decided we wanted to go traveling, me and my girlfriend, after university, but obviously COVID hit. So it was kind of a bit tricky at that point. So it kind of gave us the opportunity to kind of work, to build up a bit more funds, to then go out when we could. So after about a year, Thailand opened its borders. And then we were on the first flight out, one of the first flights out to Phuket, where that was the start of it was about a 9-month period to 12 months of traveling. So jumped on a flight to Thailand, to the whole of Southeast Asia. We worked around then to Singapore, Bali, New Zealand, and finished off in Australia. So as a lot of people do after studies, I'd say I know a fair few did, gap years and things. This was a perfect time to kind of see the world before, after that, getting into jobs. And I say settling down, but, having a bit more kind of responsibility as such. So that's kind of the fun side of things. I then decided to go out and work on a cattle station in the Northern Territory, Outback, Australia. And the reason why, I think it's kind of a challenge for myself. It's a thing in Australia where you have called the working holiday visa. So you have to basically work 88 days to be to then be eligible to move on to the next visa and so on. So it's quite a long process, I think, if you actually want to become a resident in Australia. This isn't really, or wasn't, an option for me at the very beginning, but you have to take this working holiday visa at the start and then see where things go. So did my 88 days. Again, harsh climate. Outback Australia is probably one of the hardest things I've done. You're looking at 12-hour days. I think we had 15,000 cattle. So we were mustering, drafting all the cattle, and all of that. So it was honestly great fun, great experience, and things like that. So we were riding bikes to get the cattle into the yards, using helicopters as well, which, chopper pilots would come in, and the bushmaster would, they'd all come in, and it was quite like out of an action movie. It was quite cool. So then coming up, I think it was the last week actually. So it was all planning on my next part of my travels, which was to go to Perth for about a week and a half to see some friends who were both from uni, and I had some friends in Perth from back home. So planning to see them, got it all in the diary, and then I was due to come home anyway, based on if my accident didn't happen around the same time. So kind of end of November, early December, I think it was. So back for Christmas, December, and then the plan was to look for work come January, and that would be it. But things did change based on what happened to me. So it was I think it was a Wednesday, midday. We were using hydraulic post rammer to hammer in metal posts to create new laneways, gateways for the cattle. Use this machinery all the way through. But long story short is that the weight of the post rammer did come down at the wrong time as I was measuring the height and then the width from the other post, causing a crush to my left lower arm. And so that's kind of the second my life, I'd say, changed. So that was a very scary moment in time, as we were quite far in the outback. But then the fight and flight response kicked in, and it was definitely the fight response that I'd say saved my life. So the initial kind of fight mode, adrenaline spiked, absolutely rocketed. So I was so alert all the way through this whole process, from the time it happened all the way through to probably getting on the helicopter, which I'll get to in a bit. But my first initial instinct was tourniquet. So again, is that because of my undergrad studies in sports injuries and rehabilitation with first aid? But honestly, it was just a natural instinct to get a tourniquet on and tie it on as hard as I can to stop the blood loss. I didn't want to collapse and faint and be out here. It could have been a very different story to what it is now. But those are the things that I didn't even process in my head at the time. But it was tourniquet, kind of came straight to it. So then we, with another guy, and we basically drove to get help. And again, Outback Australia is in the middle of nowhere. So I went to the pub, which was our nearest source of help at the time. And the pub isn't what you call an English pub. It is literally a shed in the middle of nowhere. So, and the pub is the local campsite, post office and pub. So it's kind of and the pub didn't even do draft beer. So it's just cans. So that's the type of setting we're kind of in at the minute. So the focus was for me was to stay awake, I think, not faint at the time. So we were at help right now, and I kind of instigated my own first aid because, if I'm honest, people didn't know what to do. But what we did was I shouted for the ambulance, and I just said, call a effing helicopter now. And they didn't really know what to do, or they couldn't see my arm. They could just see me and in the car. And I got out, and the guys who were at the pub, they just kicked in and straight on the phone. So I was then laying on the ground with my feet raised above my head. They all sorted me the cushion and everything. Then we tied a tourniquet on using my belt and probably a 12-inch screwdriver just to get it as tight as possible with that lever. Again, I just told them to pull it as hard as they possibly could, which again, the paramedics were on the phone at this point. So then I was told it would be about an hour until the ambulance came. So that wasn't ideal at all. Obviously, as my adrenaline started to come down, pain started to go up. So it was more about keeping my eyes awake. And I just remember one particular lady who was just talking to me constantly and actually kind of just slapping me on the face a little bit to keep me awake, keep me talking, because what we didn't want is obviously to faint and be out of consciousness. So again, I got... stayed awake the whole time. Like I said before, the adrenaline, it was fight mode. So when the ambulance arrived, it was actually quite a cloudy morning. It then peaked to a bit of sun, but the weather and the temperature in Australia at this point was around, you're looking at 40 degrees and about 70-80% humidity. So it was a hot time to work. I kind of got used to it, they say, but I don't think I did. Electrolytes every day, but I would say you actually never get used to the heat. You just learn how to deal with it. So, I was what they call a pommy out there. So, as you know, the famous 10-pound pom. So any English person to go over to Australia and work, you automatically get nicknamed the pom. So I was the pommy at the time. And, so ambulance arrived, and it's not like your usual St. John's ambulance. It is literally a truck, a ute. No, it was a ute, which is kind of like a Defender, an old Defender type thing. So only fit me and a small nurse in the back. And the paramedic who was there at the time actually worked in Afghanistan. So when I heard that, I thought, I'm actually in pretty safe hands here. And he'd worked, I found out later, he'd, been out there with amputees and been on the battleground. So I feel like that was a kind of a blessing, really. One thing I will mention as well, which kind of always has stuck with me, and I've been in contact with him since, was another English guy was actually cycling from South Australia all the way to North Australia. So right down the middle, all the way up through to Alice Springs and all the way up through to Darwin. And I just heard this English voice, and it kind of, being so far away from home, made me kind of feel that I wasn't actually that far away. I heard an English voice. He was from Cornwall. and he was there, and he actually was a first aider. And we always kind of look back and think about, kind of like a guardian angel. He kind of came out of nowhere, but was able to help me with first aid and talk to me and comfort me. So been in contact with him since, and he's still out in Australia. But I think one day we're definitely going to have to grab a few beers down in Cornwall at some point. So that was that was special. So about an hour later, again, a very long hour of waiting, ambulance arrived. And I thought, they're already talking about the helicopter, so I thought the helicopter's going to be here as well, and I'll be able to get to Darwin as quickly as possible, for the surgery I need. And just actually, as we were driving to the pub, so going back about as the time of the accident, I kind of knew I was going to lose my arm based on what happened and the condition. And so your own body, but I said, what surgeon is able to save what has just happened? In my head, I even said it out loud. I said, I'm going to lose my arm. But again, with the adrenaline kicking in, it wasn't a thing I could process really. It was just get to safety is what I need, get to the hospital, because then that's when I'll be in safe hands. So I thought, going back to when I'm at the pub ground, I thought I was going to be helicoptered from there. And I don't know how long it would have taken from there, but I think the distance we're looking at is from Land's End to John O'Groat. So you're looking at about 500, 600 kilometres or whatever, a long old way. And so what they did say was we're actually going to have to drive an hour to the next town, which is the distance. So 1 hour drive going 80 Ks, going about 100 Ks, I think, or they would have gone quicker actually. They're an ambulance. So to try and get to the next town where the helicopter will pick you up. And I'm thinking, why can't they come here? And what it was, as I said earlier, it was a bit of a cloudier morning in Australia, kind of the wet seasons are coming, and the storm started. So I had to then drive an hour within the ambulance. Again, I was morphined up. I think it was morphine they gave me at the start to start kicking in. And if I'm honest, didn't really do too much, or at least I didn't feel like it was doing too much. So we got to the next town, and then helicopter was there. I was straight in the helicopter. And then as I get in the helicopter, they say, we're going to have to stop off in an hour to refuel. So it's like, God, okay. And I'm thinking, stay calm, because throughout this time, I never asked questions, because if I'm being honest, I was also quite scared about what the answer might be, even though I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, which probably didn't help, but I kind of just stayed quiet this whole time. And so we got in the helicopter, and travelled about an hour. We then landed, and it was kind of like an emergency land as well because of the weather. And then we were waiting. We refueled, ready to go, but the pilot didn't have the green light to take off to get back because the storm was coming in. So right now I'm lying, I'm wired up, I'm kind of cabled in, strapped in, so I can't really move. And we're waiting. I think it might have been about another hour. I'm not 100% on the time. Time went, I don't know if it went quick or slow, but what I do know is I was in the helicopter as the sun was setting over the Outback. So kind of got a view of that, which the paramedics on board kind of tapped me to say, look out the window. But on takeoff of that second takeoff, from what I remember, it was pretty horrific in terms of I was injected with ketamine. I don't know how much, but it absolutely blew my socks off. And I say numbed all the pain, but I was just screaming, like, what's going on? What's going on? And I couldn't hear anyone. I could see the paramedics there because they're all mic'd up, but I wasn't, being the patient. I kind of was freaking out. I was kicking. Because I was strapped, I obviously wasn't going anywhere. I didn't really like the effect of the ketamine at all. Hated it, but it did help with the pain, and that's all I needed. But so I told them I don't want that again, because it's the way it messed with my head. I think it just kind of blew it 1,000. It was just like, what's going on? But as we're taking off, the chopper's kind of, it's not smooth, it's rocky. There's lightning strikes outside. There's black clouds. There's thunder and lightning, and I'm freaking out. Then get to the hospital, and there's about 30 people in the operating theatre. So I knew this was kind of a big thing, 30 people all running around, all being asked to wait after work. So this was about 8-9 o'clock. It's emergency procedure, but I'm rushed in, and already I've got the tetanus jab. they're cutting off my jeans, cutting off my top, ready to kind of go in for theatre. And the surgeon there is explaining what are the possibilities of potential amputation. Potentially we can try and save the arm. We'll do our best, but it's all that what they say to make you feel better. But in my head, I knew I was going to wake up without my arm below the elbow as I woke up. And again, I didn't know how long the surgery was going to be. They gave you a rough idea, and they said kind of if the surgery, if we're going to amputate, might take 2 hours, but if we're not, we're going to try and save it. It could take 8 to 15 hours or whatever. I actually woke up at, I think, 1 a.m, which gave me the answer before actually even looking at my arm. I knew it was amputated based on that time. So that was a pretty hard thing to process at the very start. I was, say, all alone. I knew everyone was thinking of me. I mean, I didn't even mention just then, but I actually tried to get hold of my parents on the, when I was hooked up on the helicopter before I went in, and I actually didn't get through to my parents, but my sister picked up, rang Becca as well, my girlfriend. And I told them I broke my arm because I couldn't come around to the fact of saying the potential amputation of my arm. I just said I broke my arm, but I said everything's going to be okay. But that was a pretty hard thing, again, for them to see me straight away without any warning. So those were very difficult conversations. And then the surgeons in Australia are incredible because they actually FaceTimed my parents before I was going in to theatre. And they said, chances are, likelihood. And I actually spoke to, I think my mum and dad were around on my auntie and uncle's house at the time, as they'd heard. And this was midnight? I don't know what time it was in the UK, actually. It was a bit disorientating. But I think I just remember telling them, whatever happens, like, this won't stop me from achieving anything. It sounds cliche, but I genuinely said that. And not knowing what the outcome could have been, they knew they were all there for support. And being the resilient individual I am, I just knew there's always a way, I'll find a way. And then that kind of brings us into the journey I had from coming back in the UK until now, really. So, yeah, that's kind of the story of Australia side. And then I was 2 weeks in hospital with great care, unbelievable care. Had a few issues with my lymphatic system where I was swollen the whole one side. So it was hospital for 2 weeks, and they were very cautious of why I was so swollen on the one side. Again, I'm kind of panicking, thinking, is this going to be a long-term problem of swelling and damage of the lymph nodes and all of this? I was then put on a zero-fat diet for, I think, 4 or 5 days, which didn't actually have any help, which was good. So then I could go back onto my normal diet. But the main thing as well, which is what the body's incredible, is how the body can heal. And so I was attached to a vacuum machine. So a vacuum machine would basically suck out any juice. I used to call it elbow juice, which the body doesn't want. Kind of looks like honeycomb. And I think my body was producing about 500 mil every 24 hours. And it wasn't kind of going down for about a good week. And there's a bit of concern with the plastic surgeons as they kind of tested that, because they said it should be coming down by now. So they didn't tell me too much, but eventually it did come down. And then I was able to go on a portable vac where I could actually leave the hospital after 2 weeks and stay in a hotel for 1 week before flying back to London and then driving back home on the 9th of December.
Wow, that must be pretty scary for your family as well as for you.
Yeah, I think for them they thought, am I on my own? And they're all together, and they didn't know the answer until the following day. So I think it was hard for everyone, I think, immediate family, to hear that. But yeah, as kind of I've processed things, this could have been worse. And I think, so grateful that I'm, here to live another day and to, and now my approach to life has changed. I think when something like this does happen, it definitely has an effect on, decisions and things like that. So,
yeah. How have you coped with like reliving life just using one arm now? What do you struggle with the most? What's your biggest struggle with?
Shoelaces.
Yeah, shoelaces are a pain.
I would say shoelaces, but in the grand scheme of things, like I said to you earlier, there is nothing I haven't been able to do because of my arm. I've always found a way. If it takes a bit longer, there's adaptations, adjustments, but it's things we are so used to. I think I've had two arms for 23 years of my life. So, like you say,
it opens up your eyes. You have to think outside the box now of how you do things now.
Absolutely. But the only thing I haven't been able to do, I was at Stoke Mandeville last week at Limb Power, and it's one of the biggest UK's meetups of amputees in the country, and managed to try everything, even wheelchair basketball. I thought I was going to go around in circles all the time, but actually it was a better outcome than what I thought. And I think that's the whole point of it, is you've got to try stuff and not kind of take a step back. Because at first I was like, well, wheelchair basketball, how the hell am I going to even play with, one hand on a wheelchair? But actually, I think I scored 2 baskets and I managed to have great fun, and it was a big success. So I think now it's just, if you want to try something, in my head, it's just don't wait to think you're ready. Just go and try it. And that kind of brings on to where we met at the CrossFit game, not the CrossFit Games, at the competition. It's about a month ago now, isn't it? About 3 weeks ago. Yeah. But we'll come on to that in a bit.
Yes. My next question, that brings us on nicely. Our next question is, so what has been the biggest obstacles you've faced, and how have you overcome them?
So again, this is an interesting question, because I can talk about physical kind of obstacles or, your mental obstacles. So in terms of physical obstacles, again, patience is key being in the mind. You've got to be patient. So I've worked a lot on my patience in terms of carrying out tasks that beforehand were so easy without even thinking. And now you've got a thing where you kind of having to adapt and think quite hard on how are you going to do this same thing that you did before with 2 hands. But as I said, there's always a way. With time, it's possible. But I would say in terms of the mental side of things, is my biggest thing is discipline. Discipline around rehab, discipline around routine. So I was just very strict from the very start of my journey of recovery in those 2 things. So especially coming back after a whole year of pretty much sun, 35, 40 degrees, beaches and whatnot. I came back to January and February England after having this traumatic injury. So I knew it could have ended up in a bad place, but I kind of did things that would able me to reduce those negative things that came with that. So, staying in my room all day, feeling sorry for myself, all of this. I get everyone's different, and they might have a process of, well, for the first 6 months, this is what I had to do to then get past that. But for me, it was from the get-go, I've got to get these foundations right now, being a young, 23, early 20s, got the rest of my life to live. Why will I sit and waste 6 months dwelling on what's happened and feeling sorry for myself, when actually I can take the right approach? Or at least my approach was, get it right. Let's focus and start building these foundation blocks now, because you're going to have to do it one day, So for me, it was Jan, Feb, and those were the hardest months. Obviously, being so dark and grey anyway, they're pretty crappy months for, any really. No one enjoys those 2 months. So I thought, if I get past that, we're into spring and then we're into summer and whatnot. So I was really disciplined with 2 things. It was gym, so it's mainly CrossFit, and ice baths. Again, gets a lot of not hate to say it, but like a bit of question mark around people are mad doing these ice baths, cold plunges, whatnot, cold showers. But honestly, for anyone out there, it was a massive benefit to both probably my mental and physical health. Obviously, the famous Wim Hof, I read about him before I knew about him, so that's why I started to do that. And then my auntie and uncle at Christmas bought me this little plunge pool, and kind of set me as a challenge, kind of get in it every day and build up to it. And every time I was in that pool was kind of like my safe space. Thoughts in my head cleared, and that was kind of, it might have been 2% of the day, but for that 2%, I had nothing in there. And then it set me to get up early. In the winter, it's probably 8 o'clock, but now in the summer, I'm getting up a lot earlier because of the weather. But it gave me a focus first thing in the morning, and especially on a Monday. If I could get it in there on a Monday morning, for me, it would set the present for the rest of that week. Sets the standard. That's it. Sets the standard for that week. And if I had a good Monday, I'd have a good Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And if I thought that, I'd then have action to do that, and it would actually lead to that. So those are my two very strict discipline actions I took at the very start.
The way, what your strength was your mental strength, which kind of really got you through everything, really.
Definitely, I think. And again, it's like to say there's been hard days as well. There has been. But there's definitely been things I've done in place to reduce those hard days. And I think if people are struggling, again, it's not just applied to those who have been through huge trauma physically, but again, mental trauma and life's challenges, is that there are things that can limit those feelings. And if you can find out what fits for you, then just crack on with it, because, they build habits. And again, habits before might seem like a challenge, but then you actually crave the feeling of, like you say, getting a nice bath, going to the gym. It could be, if you're into your yoga, your breathing, all those different things, going for a walk, your body then starts to crave it. And that's when you've kind of mastered that habit. So I think that's quite important.
So how soon from when you were back did you decide, I want to go to the gym and start doing gym now?
I think if I look back, it'd be interesting, but I think I took the whole of December off completely because I knew that'd be full on with the Christmas build-up. And I want to say it's probably January again. I focused on ice baths and, I think I did a few runs maybe. I want to say February, I probably fully started. And the reason why is because I was used to play rugby. Again, never say never. There are amputee rugby leagues up north and over the country, so there definitely are opportunities. But for me, it was the CrossFit gym specifically. It wasn't for me. I could have just joined the leisure centre, but the whole community aspect, the actual sounds, I'm not saying people judging those other gyms, but I just felt no judgment whatsoever, and no special treatment either. So even when we're loading up bars, or even at the very start, I didn't even probably touch a barbell for first month, but I was doing other body weight stuff. There was no help. And my coach even said, I'm just going to treat you exactly the same as everyone else. And I went, but that's what I want. I don't want any, I'll carry this for you, but and whatever, let me figure out how to do it and I'll master it. And I think now with just loading up a barbell, got my bar jack, which definitely helps. If I forget that, then it's a bit of a workout to actually get the plates on. So I learned from those errors. But and that's just the way I wanted it to be, kind of get on with it. You're part of that group, you're in that community, and then it's all about adapting. And that's what I did, is adapt in both daily life and in the gym. So,
there's one thing I hate with a passion is special treatment. Just treat me like everyone else, and then I can find my own way how to do it.
I spoke to a guy in a wheelchair, and he said they've got their own system of how to get in and out of their car and put their wheelchair in. And someone came over and said, "Oh no, I'll help you with that. I'll help you with that." And he said, "No, it's fine." But they persisted and then helped him. But actually, it made his life a lot more difficult because it was in a different position that he's used to, and all of this. So, like you say, just I feel like people,
find your own way, and it works.
Yeah, just like any other person, and they have their ways. And now, you have your way to do stuff. I have my way to do stuff. So, and the big thing in that is there's the way. So,
and so like you went to your first gym session maybe a month or two after your incident. Then 7 months later, you decided to enter your first CrossFit competition. So this was the adaptive competition. We were in the same competition. So that's how I met you.
Yeah, I know. So interesting, because what I did is I actually wanted to. So what I first did post getting into CrossFit and stuff, and in the gym, I started to reach out to other amputees, and social media has its pros and cons, but for me, it's been nothing but positive, really 97-8% of the time. So I was just on tags and just searched amputee, upper limb amputee. And I've met now so many people since my accident and from now in Australia, America, Spain, all over. And again, I started to build this in my head, enter this new world of adaptive athletes, adaptive sport. And it's, again, you've got to kind of see it from its perception as well as what's happened is you see a completely different world that I probably never would have seen if my accident wouldn't have happened. And in my head, it's always about moving forward and not looking back. So with that mentality, I was reaching out to amputees, reaching out to other para athletes and things like that, all adaptive athletes. And then before you know it, you're in this world where all on your Instagram really is adaptive athletes. So, and so that was only a positive for me. But in terms of that competition, I don't know where I found it, actually. I don't know, because a lot of it's promoted on socials. But I wanted to volunteer because I said, look, I'm definitely not ready to compete at whatever. And actually, the progression I made from a talk with Carla, Adapt All or Nothing, from I competed, I'd actually kind of improved, or at least the focus of my recovery, I'd definitely improved within that time frame, rapidly increased. So, but at the time, I volunteered, thinking I'll just come along, give out the t-shirts, help a bit out where they need me. Had a call that day from Carl, and he said, "Oh, I've just seen that you volunteered, seen your Instagram stuff." He said, "Why don't you compete?" And I was like, "Well, I had a recent amputation only in November. November. I just don't think I'm ready." And he said, "Look, we're here trying to build the sport, build the views on it. So just come along and we'll adapt the CrossFit comp for your needs." As you know, I think I was in upper limb 2.
Upper extremities, yeah.
So 2 point, because again I could hang, but really, So he was like, compete. So then I signed on that day, and then I think we had 3 months before it, and before you know it, it was the 18th of June, and we were down in Wiltshire, and then I was competing. So with all these adaptive athletes and amazing athletes.
And you thinking you're not going to do much, and you ended up snatching 52 kilograms.
Did on that day, yeah. It's a bit of a surprise, I think, for me and everyone watching. But
I think everyone watching was just in shock.
Yeah, I think I was competing against a guy called Sam, who's an incredible athlete, and he was beating me 2-0 on the events, and this was the third event. So I kind of said, I had a little bit of experience with a snatch. Again, I'd done it. I think the heaviest I'd ever done was 40 odd or something. And then with the comp, as people say, you've got the surrounding crowds, you've got like the hype, you're fueled by energy drinks and all of that, energy gels. So, I just thought, leave nothing out here and just really just send it and go for it. And then, chucked it up again. Can always work on a bit of form and mobility. But that was a good achievement for me, I think, on that snatch.
This brings me on to the next question. What was your biggest and proudest achievement?
So I'm going to focus this on since my accident. And I would say just the way I've managed myself and I'd say, with being myself with other people since my accident. I've tried to not change the way I behave in terms of temper and whatnot. And just my discipline, I think, has been kind of had a huge impact on what has come out of my recovery and training and things like that. So,
that's a huge achievement, going from such a traumatic accident like that to now being so positive and just getting out there and achieving things now.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a case of I've got to get it not done straight away, but one day, this is me for the rest of my life. So I was at Limpower last week and was playing badminton and other sports. And again, people ask kind of, a few people have assumed I was born with it based on the way I think I've been so positive up here. And then when I tell them it was only 7 months ago, they're in shock to think how kind of I'm putting myself out there. But for me, for anyone, I think who's become a recent amputee, and there's charities out there I mean, I'm going to give a bit of a shout out to, got Amputation Foundation, which were absolutely brilliant. I'm in talks now with the Matt Hampson Foundation. There's so many charities that are out there to help people. And I think if you're ever feeling like where to go, get in contact with these people, go on socials and find them, because it's incredible what the support is and where it can lead to.
And it's like you said before, in everyday life, you would never meet another person with an amputee. But as soon as you go through all these organizations and groups, you end up finding hundreds and hundreds, and you make all these new circles of friends, and it leads to new things.
Yeah. And like you say, with the CrossFit comp, we're already booked on for the next comp in September, mixed able-bodied and adaptive athlete comp. So that's just going to be massive, I think, in growing the kind of the sport. I mean, there'll be 60 athletes there, 30 adaptive. So I think that's going to be incredible, I think, to be a part of. And like you say, in 5 years' time, even next year, whatever, these sports are growing and participation is going to increase in viewers.
If anyone watching wants to come and watch Sam compete, want to watch me compete, come down in September, on the 10th of September, to St. Albans. We're going to be doing a CrossFit competition. It's going to be the biggest one yet. Yeah,
it is, because I think there were 20 odd athletes were there at the Wiltshire Gate, at the CrossFit.
Yeah, that was an inspiring event.
Yeah,
everyone smashed that event.
It was incredible. It was a good one.
So my next question: what would you say to somebody who feels they are unable to reach their full ability because of their disability?
So I'll go back again with just how I dealt with it in only the last 7 months, is to have discipline and give yourself choices, I think, as well. So first of all, with discipline, again, it's motivation, I think, is one thing, but to have the discipline to be able to really get up, get out of bed and go to the gym, go for a walk, go for a run, or like read a book or do whatever, that has helped massively. I think there has been darker days when I've sat on my phone scrolling or whatever, and I've kind of gone to bed late and whatnot. And again, all these factors that can help then the next day. Have a focus, I think, is a big thing. I came back from traveling with no kind of vision of what the future's going to hold. And I think the most important thing from this is sounds a bit, whatever, but don't look too far ahead. I think I was thinking of what am I going to do next year? Like, what am I going to do in 6 months? What am I doing for work? What am I going to get as a job? Am I all of this? I wasn't driving then. How am I going to drive again? I'm back driving now. I'm on the books to start looking back for careers and things. Things take time. And for me, time is key. Time is one of the biggest things that heal. You look at my actual physical skin graft, and then you look at the mental side. It's all time. But with discipline, it's massive. So I think have a focus. So I could no longer play rugby. I didn't have that focus of training twice a week, game day on a Saturday. There was no, what was the purpose of me now? I just walked into the local gym at CrossFit, and take a day at a time. It built and built and built. And then opportunities come up. Okay, the CrossFit comp, I'll volunteer. Why don't you compete? Okay, we'll compete. And now we're booked onto the next one. And it's kind of like a domino effect. And I think for me, I need to look at that for what I'm going to do in my future job as well. I'm not back to work yet, still focusing on this big recovery. So don't look too far ahead, because it can be scary. I think, honestly, just look at each day
by day.
Absolutely. And before you know it, 7.5 months post, and it's kind of gone in a bit of a flash, even though some days are slow. But yeah.
The more you do, the more other doors open, and things will come from it.
Yeah. And if I can apply that to my fitness side of life, I mean, I'm trying to put that towards my career work side of life. And then you can apply that principle to all aspects of someone's life. So your relationships and things like that. I think, it's very important to have a focus. Otherwise you'll just get lost in what your purpose is. So
what kind of career would you like to go into? Because you've got your physio and sports background. What would you like to go into if there were no restrictions?
If there were no, it's interesting. Again, I'm in that process right now. So it's a case of I'm reaching out to many people to kind of get an understanding of what there is, what opportunities are out there. I definitely think I want to use my communication, personal skills in a job role. And also, I wonder if, like you say, there is, with my undergrad degree being in sports injuries rehabilitation, is there an area using that to get into adaptive sport and giving actually there's people opportunities to partake. So again, I don't know the answer to that question. That's what I'm figuring out right now. So hopefully in maybe 4-6 months, whatever, I'll have a.
There's going to be lots of great things to come. So if people want to connect with you and follow your journey, and how can they find you?
So the best place is Instagram. I think I turned my Instagram onto public only because the only way I could reach out to other amputees was through Instagram and being open and public. So using the hashtag amputee and whatever has honestly helped me connect. And then I've been on FaceTime calls with so many different people. I mean, I've been on FaceTime call with Xavier from Spain, who's top, I want to get this right, I think he's top 5 or at least top 3 of the upper extremity adaptive athlete in the CrossFit. So he's at the CrossFit Games. But he was just so helpful because, again, he's an upper limb adaptive athlete, and to see what could be possible, it kind of started to paint a picture of just what can be done. Not to say I'm ever going to get to that level, that's kind of way ahead, but just actually how it's just getting on with it, training just as hard as
what can be achieved.
Yeah. And that was for many different athletes and even just individuals who I spoke to have been in car accidents, motorbike accidents, kind of there's always a way. And the ways to adapt, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yes, there's going to be lots of great things coming up in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Anyway, it's been great to chat to you today, Henry. And I'll be seeing you soon in the next competition. So thanks for the podcast interview today. And if anyone wants to watch what he does or follow his journey, make sure you follow him up on Instagram.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for your time as well. It's been a really good chat. So I'll see you in September, and we'll compete out on the floor, I'm sure.
Definitely, mate. See you soon.
See you in a bit, Ant. Cheers.